your opinion, is a reset needed by the president? And if so, is this trip a first step?
You're talking about an entire reset, domestic and foreign policy
Correct.
reset. I think that the president's doing great overseas. I think he comes back with a little bit of the buoyancy from that. If he can get tax reform done, and I'm pretty sure Eric would agree with me, maybe Lawrence as well, I mean, all four of you for that matter, if you can get tax reform done, then you're really on the boat. I'm just talking about him and I go back into the Wall Street world and the money world, but that's the critical component of this thing right now. And so I know Vice President Pence is up there talking. Both Steve Bannon and Reince Priebus are going to be leaving the trip early to execute that agenda. And so to me, I think that this is a great time for him to be away. I think it's very interesting that you go from a country that's got the paradox of oil, Eric being a former oil trader. What is the paradox of oil? They had so much oil they didn't develop their technological or other aspects of their economy. You're flying to Tel Aviv, where it's an oasis of venture and biotechnology. This is a country that really didn't have oil for the first 60 years of its history, and so they used human capital more so than they did productive capital like oil. And you can see they have a much more vibrant, more diverse economy. So I think the president's on a real learning mission right now as well.
I appreciate that. Lawrence, sticking to the win so far from this president's trip in Israel, making history by being the first sitting president to actually go visit the Western Wall, also known as the Wailing Wall. I think we have an image of that, of President Trump going there. I also had the privilege of visiting that wall. How important do you think those type of historical firsts, Eric talked about him being the first to go to all three religious meccas. Tell me your take on that importance, that significance.
First of all, we have a president now that's taking his role back as being the commander-in-chief as well as the leader of the free world. We saw in the past administration a president that apologized essentially for America across the country, and I thought it was kind of embarrassing.
Across the country?
So I'm sorry, across the world.
Okay.
And so now we have President Trump telling the world we are going to take our place. And I think from a religious standpoint, it was never a partisan issue when it came to Israel. Democrats and Republican presidents supported Israel. And now we have this President Obama back in the day that didn't have quite the relationship with Bibi. Now we have President Trump taking his place back in, saying America is behind you, we will support you, and now going to that wall.
Well, let's call it what it is, though, Lawrence. Right. It wasn't just not quite that relationship.
They didn't like each
President
other.
Obama lobbied to get rid of Bibi Netanyahu as the leader of Israel.
And you referred to the campaign.
Not only the campaign when he was reelected as Prime Minister of Israel, when he did come over, when Bibi Netanyahu came over to address Congress, President Obama said he's not going to meet with them.
Right.
I mean, those were big words.
Considering Israel is our most trusted ally. And so right now what we see is this president extending his hand, making it known to the world that we will support Israel.
Kat, I'm going to let you get in here, but first I want to say, I hear what you two gentlemen are saying, and factually, you're absolutely accurate. Bad blood between Obama and Netanyahu. But from my friends in Israel, Netanyahu, in and of himself, is not the end-all, be-all when it comes to Israel in its totality. So there's still some discontent among even the Israeli people around his leadership. But, Kat, your take on all of these big-picture items.
Wait. Can I ask you?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So when President Obama said we want to go back to 1967 lines, do you think the people of Israel, forget Obama or forget Netanyahu, do you think the people of Israel said, that's a good idea?
I think right-wingers absolutely did not. No, and I'm not saying that Obama has...
Israelis. There are differences of opinions among Israelis.
Like, they've got like 12, 15 parties. So I'm not saying that he...
You will almost find unanimous consent
not unanimous.
on whether or not Israel should go back to 67.
67 lines.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yes. I think pretty much you had Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard professor, saying that he was upset with the president who once advised the president on Israel. And so this is not a partisan issue. I think it's pretty much universal that the president didn't have a good relationship with Bibi.
But that's different than a good relationship with Israel.
Right.
No, that's what I'm going to push back on you, Lawrence.
And in general, Israel is very much our ally, has been. It's not as much of a foreign policy challenge.
Sure.
In Saudi Arabia, I thought that the way that he was speaking about, not trying to force our way of life on other people, that's something that I really, really did like, because our attempts at nation building have just been a failed experiment, and not like the good kind, like when the professor accidentally created the Powerpuff Girls. I mean, just like a disaster, and we've been spending so much money on it. So I thought that it was a good thing to see. I certainly do. I like the way he talked, and we're going to get into his speech a little bit later. But again, this is going to need to be an ongoing thing. It's going to take more than one trip or two trips, a couple of good trips, a couple of good photo ops.
But
It's
it
a good
did make
start.
his
It's a good start, and
presence known. Like, for instance, shaking the hand of his wife and daughter, that was a requirement. I think that's a big step.
Absolutely.
Making another country, we're not going to force our ways on you, but you will respect me and my family.
First seated U.S. president to ever put his hand on that wall that you pointed out.
Absolutely.
First one ever. I mean, he is breaking new ground almost by the week on. How many times have we said this is the first time someone's done this?
No doubt, Eric, that is very powerful, that image right there.
I think we should point out just quickly that he is moving the influence back to the Sunni Israeli influence away from the Shia influence. Because if you look at the Iranian deal, you were switching the axis of power in the Middle East back to the Persians and the Iranians. And I think President Trump in the last 2 days has said we're not going in that direction 100%. So that's very, very meaningful for the Israelis.
Certainly so. President Trump also addressing last week the report that he discussed classified information with Russian officials about an ISIS plot to blow up jetliners, the source of which is now thought to have come from Israeli intelligence.
Just so you understand, I never mentioned the word or the name Israel. Never mentioned it during that conversation. They were all saying I did. So you had another story wrong. Never mentioned the word Israel.
Okay, Eric
I'm
Bolling.
looking at, talking about. Look at that.
Let me go here, Eric Bolling. So he says very plainly, I did not mention the word Israel. But isn't that different than saying I did not offer up intelligence that was provided by Israel? Isn't that a different statement?
Of course it's a different statement, but neither one of them are relevant. And the whole point
Not
was
relevant?
No,
Tell me why.
Because they're alleging that this leak alleged President Trump did with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov is that he told them about the ISIS was going to start using or looking to use laptops as a form of explosive device on airliners. We had been talking about it for 3 days prior to that. So whatever he quote unquote leaked to Lavrov was already in the public domain. So whether or not that original intelligence came from Israel or not is irrelevant. It was publicly known by everyone, including, we probably reported it on here as well. But the Israelis, in the aftermath of that, now the left is saying, oh my God, can you believe he just probably blew up a good relationship with whoever provided the intelligence? The Israeli says, yeah, it was us, and guess what? We're still good with you.
So guess what? I actually don't agree to the description that they blew up a very important critical relationship with Israel, but I do think that there has been concern in general around intelligence sharing. Kat, do you think that it all is damaging or at least concerning?
I think that we'll have to wait and see what we find out from the investigations. I think that he's generally, other than that comment, kind of stayed away from that, and that has been a smart thing, and the reception has been positive. Although I do think we need to be very careful in terms of Saudi Arabia. People are talking about how wonderful the reception was in Saudi Arabia. You do need to remember that protesting is illegal in Saudi Arabia, so there could have been people who maybe did not like President Trump, had a strong dislike for President Trump, but ultimately decided they would have a stronger dislike for having no head. So they ultimately decided not to go around the protesting route.
World leaders showed up, and I'm going to talk about it in the B block, in the monologue, but world leaders from throughout the Arab world, not just our U.S. allies, but throughout the Arab world, showed up for that very important foreign policy.
And that's great.
They didn't have to.
That's great, but that's absolutely great with people like Wilbur Ross saying it's great that there was no protest. Like, well, you know, let's look at this a little bit more. They really aren't allowed to if they want heads, which I think most people do.
Yeah, so Scaramucci, I want to talk about a last point, again, sticking with the positives that we've seen so far from Israel. The White House, whitehouse.gov, put up on their website, Jerusalem, Israel. And it's an acknowledgement of Jerusalem being the capital of Israel. We haven't seen that before, and we know, there it is right there on the screen. We know that that's the goal of Israel, of course, but we also know it's a huge point of contention. It is very much in negotiation who Jerusalem belongs to. From your view, is this a diplomatic statement of this Trump administration, or was it not thought out?
No, I think it was well thought out, and I also think it's a positive. You have to remember he's also visiting Abbas. He's going to Bethlehem to do that. And so I think he's recognizing, and he's one of the guys that can actually pull off a deal like this. He's recognizing that Netanyahu will have to give a little. He'll have to move Abbas, and it'll be an interesting thing to happen here. My prediction is if a deal happens, it will be because Abbas is stronger than we think he is as it relates to the terrorist centers that are in the Palestinian Authority. Because if he's got the political influence, he'll cut the deal with President Trump. He'll recognize that some solution that has Trump in it will be way better than, a potential future leader. So it'll be very telling. If you can't get a deal done, it means that the terrorist centers inside the Palestinian Authority have way more power than Abbas wants them to have.
Lawrence, your takes on Trump's ability to, I think he's calling it the ultimate deal. We know Clinton has tried this. We know Bush has tried this. We know John Kerry and the Obama administration tried this. Everyone has failed. Talks broke down in 2014. They have yet to resume. Your take on why President Trump is best positioned to make it happen?
Well, I think the president is not afraid of doing this. He knows that there are going to be repercussions as well. And let's not forget that the president is not afraid of Bibi as well. They've disagreed on some things. I mean, when you saw him,
yes.
Exactly, the settlements, when he brought him back to the Rose Garden and they're talking, and he straight up called him out and said, you know what, we're going to have to give and take on this. So this notion that the president is somehow just going to let Bibi get his way, I think we have to be honest about that as well.
Oh, I certainly have not thought that.
But I do think the president is prepared to move on this. I would like to see the plan. And how,
exactly.
what day,
what
does
the ultimate deal look like?
Right.
They're both, and Anthony's right. They're both going to have to give, and the president's going to have to be that deal maker, the negotiator that he's claimed to be and wants to be. But I will tell you, the reason why you haven't seen a president put his hand on the Wailing Wall or the Western Wall in past is because that's a symbol that if you're going to go meet with Abbas later on, that's a symbol that most presidents will be afraid to have in their a couple of days hindsight. 2 days ago you're meeting with Abbas, but 2 days ago you have your hand on the Wailing Wall. That didn't work in the past. But Trump shows he's a different kind of politician. Right.